We have the right to self-government, to self-determination of land. And the people that are here are going to go back and continue the struggle. This is not an end, it's only a beginning.
Hello, welcome to this episode of The True Canadians, the podcast. I'm David Walenko, your host. The podcast is based on the book that I co-wrote with Métis writer Patricia Russell called The True Canadians. Today we have the honor of being with Andres Filella. Did I get that right?
Yeah, Andres Filella.
Okay. He is the Director of Environment and Climate Change at the Métis Nation of Alberta, or what is now the Otipemisiwak Métis Government. And I'm really excited to be talking with you for a whole variety of reasons, one of which is that I'm actually, in addition to being a writer professionally, I'm doing my PhD and I'm finishing a PhD on climate change and literature, contemporary literature, as opposed to dystopian literature. So this is a really cool topic for me. We often ask people initially sort of a little bit about their own history because our listeners are very curious about how people got from where they were to where they are. And you've come a long way geographically as well as in your career, because you're actually from Ecuador, I believe, and you're an engineer. And you came to Canada and for education, and then you've done a lot in the energy sector in North and Latin America. So maybe talk a little bit about that and how you got attracted to coming to work for the Métis Nation.
Yeah, and you mentioned dystopian literature. I really hope that we turn to a utopian reality with climate change and not dystopian. Yeah, really nice to meet you. I was born and raised in Ecuador, and it's a small country in Latin America. Ever since I was young, I've always had a fascination about climate change, this impending issue and what are we going to do about it. An opportunity arose where I could move to Edmonton. I pursued my chemical engineering degree here, and I ended up working in the energy sector, but doing environmental work. It's always been an interest of mine. And even in the oil and gas sector, the folks are looking at climate change as an issue. So I did what you call sustainability work there is, what are greenhouse gas emissions? What are we doing as organizations to ensure that we can meet the challenge of climate change? And I did that for a few years. And then I just ended up working for the Otipemisiwak Métis Government of the Métis Nation of Alberta. So that was really nice. I love it here. I find like it's extremely fulfilling to be able to talk to community members and to, in particular, with all those voices that you hear, turn that into projects and tangible things. It's really, really exciting.
That's fantastic. Well, we're going to talk about the Environment and Climate Change team, which is quite a vibrant program with the Métis Nation. I know, and I've heard a lot about the work that you've been doing. But I'm sort of curious. Our listeners will want to know, energy and climate change. This is a big hot button issue in Alberta, particularly, and nationally, internationally. It's in the news every single day. There's this whole idea about getting to net zero by 2050. Some academics say we need to spend $4.5 trillion in the next decades of an amazing amount of money to become a carbon neutral or carbon zero planet. But then we've got pushback happening, in the United States and Europe. The so-called green energy revolution in Europe is sort of taking a little bit of a step back. Even yesterday, there was media reports saying that the South is actually sort of more taking the lead now after many years of the North. I'm talking about globally, the Northern Hemisphere are taking the lead. So it seems like it's still up in the air provincially, federally, internationally, where things are going to head in climate change and the environment in the coming decades. So I just thought I'd sort of see what your general thoughts are on that, and then we'll talk about your projects.
Well, generally, I think the media and I think politically as well, unfortunately, the debate tends to go black and white. I think it's a lot more gray. It's we're going to need fossil fuel resources for the time being, obviously. There are some things that you just can't do without in terms of oil or so. To me, it's not black and white. It's about how do we transition in a good way to ensure that we can continue to have the quality of life that we do have today, while at the same time ensuring that, the next generation, actually more importantly, as we learn from our Indigenous communities, the next 7 generations have also, that quality of life, the ability to, go into the land and do the things that they can do, while at the same time, us being able to live our lives today. So I think we're going to have to do it slowly, thoughtfully, but at the same time, it's a challenge. And I think a lot of people are afraid of challenges, and this energy transition is a huge endeavor. And so people, I think understandably have concerns. And I think we need to listen to those concerns and we need to address them. So yeah, it's kind of in between. It's exciting, but at the same time, there are concerns that we need to address. Yeah.
It's interesting that you use the word transition, because that is the term that tends to be used by people who go to international climate conferences like COP. People like John Kerry, the American representative, Mark Carney, who's a former president of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, and he just wrote a book called Values, and he's even thought of as a potential prime ministerial candidate here in Canada. That's the term they use. And other people, they use this term that we mentioned a moment ago, dystopianism, particularly in the artistic community, in the literary community. And it seems to me that it makes more sense to talk about what you said, to talk about the transition, because otherwise, like if we go cold turkey, no carbon, what does that mean for energy? What does that mean for power? What does that mean for electricity, for being able to heat your home, being able to run your vehicle? So I don't have so much of a question here as an observation that you could add to. I don't think there's really any other way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's, it's not black and white. There's something, and I guess maybe this is where my chemical engineering background helps me a little bit. Fossil fuels are a great combination of storage and energy. So when you put like fuel into your car, you have a lot of energy in a small package. That makes it really easy. Where are we seeing some transition right now? Now we sell EV, so there's a battery, just so you can store that energy and use it. But there's some things where you can't just do that right now. For instance, air travel. That's going to be a space where we're going to continue to need fossil fuel energy. So what I'm really talking about is, when I say thoughtful, is to really look at where we can make big dents. Like, for instance, our homes. Every home has a roof. Well, a lot of them have roofs. And why are we not producing energy from those rooftops, right? That should be something that we should be looking at. And actually, excitingly, I'll talk about this in a little bit. We are, from the Métis Nation's perspective, looking at that. Mm-hmm. And then leave the more challenging stuff for the future. And so, again, it's not a black and white. We're not going to transition today, maybe not even tomorrow, but we really have to look at where our energy use is and look at what steps we can take to really get that energy from resources that align more closely to the values that we really hold dear, right? Ensuring that the earth is healthy. And so I think, as I said, like there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think we need to do it again thoughtfully and addressing the concerns that people have.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a global issue, but the solutions seem to be local or even communal. But everybody has to step up and do, and we will in a minute talk about the solar power project that you've had on the go. Mm-hmm. There's an academic, his name is Dessler, and he writes a textbook in the United States called Introduction to Climate Change, which I just read as the 3rd edition. And he basically said almost exactly what you just said. It's like you've read the book about air travel. He said, there'll be some places like with EVs where we can make a transition, and other places it's going to be a little bit more challenging. You can't have airplanes falling out of the sky. So we're already scared enough as it is of that. At least I am.
No, we don't want that.
Let's talk about your project. So the Environment and Climate Change team, you have a very, vibrant presence on the website of Métis Nation here in Alberta. There seems to be a lot on the go. What is front of mind for you right now that you'd like to discuss? What project or projects are you really keen on? And just tell us a little bit about what this initiative is all about.
Yeah, so our Environment and Climate Change department at the Otipemisiwak Métis Government is a fairly new department. We've maybe been over just about 2+ years as a department itself. Oh, wow. It started with myself, with just one staff back in 2017, but now we have 20+ extremely, dedicated individuals that really believe in what we're doing. We really focus on two things. First is you've talked about a little bit of climate change. We do have a lot of like climate change pieces. The intent there is to ensure that we do this mitigation, what you call mitigation and adaptation work, and to ensure that we reduce greenhouse gas emissions and that our communities are resilient to the impacts of climate change. And then the second piece is to monitor and conserve the environment, ensuring that there's a healthy environment so that our community members can exercise their rights, that they can, transfer their traditional knowledge into the new generation, stuff like that. So that's really what we focus on. There's a few initiatives under that. One of our key initiatives is something that we call a SKI. A SKI is the Cree word for earth, but it's actually not only earth, it's interconnected earth. And what we do there is to monitor environmental concerns. So we have a team of environmental monitors that go throughout the province and look at, maybe this berry patch is looking like, should our community is saying like, or maybe it's saying like, you know what, I've noticed in this lake that there's dwindling fish population. So we go into that lake and look at that. We also have a conservation initiative right now. We actually just last year completed the purchase of private land just east of Edmonton. And that's our pilot Indigenous protected and conserved area in Lamont County.
Really?
And we're looking to expand that. So we're looking at, what does land conservation or really land stewardship look for the Métis Nation within Alberta? And, I think the long-term goal is to have there a series of land bases within Alberta so that we can ensure that people can, enjoy nature there and at the same time, do some of the things that they have to do and connect with the land there. We always engage with our community. We also have a really dedicated engagement and policy team. And most recently, we partner with an organization called Iron and Earth, and we're talking to our community about the energy transition, right? And so we heard some of the things that I was talking about. We heard like a lot of excitement, but not also concerns. And so we're working on a report so that we can guide some of our programs, initiatives, and policy work as well. And so, yeah, those are kind of the things. And then the climate change work, I think that I can talk about in a little bit. Yeah.
You've hit on a really interesting topic, which is, it's land-based, like we said before, the environment as well as climate change specifically is a global issue. Obviously, we live on one Earth. But individual areas of land have different jurisdictions, different controls, different rules and regulations that I edit for the Alberta Energy Regulator here. So I see a lot of these applications for this or that or reviews and so on. So I'm really interested, this project that you mentioned just outside Edmonton, what for that project would be sort of an example of something you intend to do there, and what would be sort of an example of an outcome that you would, because with that kind of space, what you're really looking at is you're setting an example, right? You're not going to change the world overnight with this, but you're providing a leading by example effectively. Like what would it be that you want to do there and have as your outcome?
Yeah, but good question. I think there's a few outcomes, right? I think one of the things that we hear a lot is our community members want to reconnect with land, but they also want to ensure that they go back to the real way of doing conservation. And conservation is an interesting word. In the Western science, where it has tended to mean that like the human is outside of the environment. and conservation, when you talk about like, say, for instance, our park system and stuff like that, it's meant to be like, don't even touch it. And what we really learn from the community, in particular the Métis community, is that it's just interconnected. That's a keyword, right? Like, it's interconnected. It's like, you're really there. Like, you need resources from nature. That might be fish, it might be wildlife, whatever it is, or medicine, but you do it in a thoughtful way so that you don't take more than what you need, right? And so we're really looking to our community to provide spaces, there so that they can practice that type of traditions that perhaps they can't do in another piece of land. So I think, yeah, there's a few. We had a good discussion with our community members a couple of years ago when we were launching this initiative about what they wanted to achieve. And I don't have them in front of me, but we do have like 6 pillars that we're trying to achieve there. So
okay,
yeah.
It's funny you mentioned conservation and this separation of, the sort of the human and and nature, which has kind of been a problem we've had for centuries, going back to René Descartes and the duality of how we view the world, or maybe even all the way back to the Greeks. And then now some people say, well, it's actually preservation is when you're leaving something. Conservation is when you're actually managing something and it's not solely being left on its own. But I gotta ask you this, because you're not of Métis descent.
Yeah.
Neither am I. You're in an interesting, unique position. You've come into this world. Do you see something interesting about that tradition and the history of the Métis that lends itself more to crossing over and not being such a human versus environment separation that you see so much out in a colonial world?
Yeah. To be honest, like for me, like working in the Métis Nation government has been a learning opportunity for me as well. If you saw me maybe 10 years ago, I was very much like an engineer and scientist. And actually, as a matter of fact, maybe if I can share a little story, like my old director, like when we just started my job here, we had planned this big engagement sessions, and I came to him like, I got a great plan to talk to the community. It's 6 hours of presentations. And one of the first things I'm like, okay, well, really, when you go into community, you need to listen a little bit more. And I really took that as a learning piece there. And what I've learned is that a community, there's so much rich history there. There's a lot of stories. There's a lot of, traditional knowledge, right, as well, that they're willing to share with you. And it's really about we need to kind of what we call braid the Western science piece and also that traditional knowledge that we hear from the community. It's an interesting exercise, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do in the work that we do. Yeah,
you've really hit on a really critical piece, because I've seen this elsewhere in my work. Other projects I've worked on in the environment. One of my other clients is heading up a project called Co-Reclamation, and she's a professor at the University of Calgary. She goes up to Fort McMurray and works with Indigenous communities or in that environment, a lot of which has become, unfortunately, really polluted. And that's one of the things that she talks about is, and this is a hard thing, it seems, for government and industry to get their head around. They'll have workshops or they'll have open houses, but it's always, well, let's put up a presentation and hand out pamphlets. And her argument is, well, no, it's like you said, you have to sit down and listen. You have to get engaged. You have to build trust initially. First, that's foremost. And it seems as though, there's often turnover of individuals. It's almost like it's deliberate in industry or government, and then you got to start over again. Yeah. It seems like that's not the case here, and that's fantastic, because you need to spend that time, right, to engage and to sit and talk and learn and to benefit from traditional knowledge.
We place a lot of weight on when we do engage with the community. We do it in a thoughtful manner. We want to make sure that there's a promise there, like we're engaging you for this reason, and so we want to report back to what we've heard, and also are we achieving that purpose. And that's really the core of our engagement and policy team. They're a team of professionals that actually take training on how to design and implement thoughtful public participation initiatives. And you see it across. So a ski started with engagement. Our climate change work started with engagement. Our conservation work started with engagement. So I'm really proud to say that a lot of our initiatives have started first having those conversations in the community, talking to them about what's important to them, what do they want to see, in the environment and climate change work that we do. And so, and I think that's going to continue. We hear from the community, and we plan our initiatives, but we also voice those. We take those voices and we try to, really reflect them at a national level and an international level when we talk to other levels of government, when we talk to other Indigenous communities, when we talk to industry, when we talk to other non-government organizations, to ensure that we can address some of those concerns and that we can capture some of the opportunities that are in front of us.
Fantastic. Well, that's a good place to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some specific projects, including the Climate Change Action Plan. We're here with Andres Filella, and we'll be right back.
Hello. This is Audrey Patra. As Métis people, we have always known, as much as it is important, in today's world, we need jobs, but we also know all our lives we've been taught to respect the land, respect the people, respect our traditions. And that's where we are today. In our Department of Environment and Climate Change, we have the expertise to look going forward how we will protect our land, our people, the natural resources. When I think back of the things we did, whether that was looking after the environment by making sure we understood what those plants meant out there, what we did in the days of the buffalo hunt, what we did with the hides, what our ancestors and our grandparents and our parents did to protect and use everything that came from those animals and the sun that supported us. And today we have a solar project which we call the gift from the sun. And we are able to talk about clean energy and the idea of powering our buildings using that energy. Our solar plant at Métis Crossing is going to be so important for the future, not just for the Métis Nation, the Smoky Lake town, the Smoky Lake County. See the value of that solar project that is going to support the Métis Nation in the future.
All right, we're back. And as I promised, we're going to talk about some specific initiatives, particularly related to climate change. Maybe we could talk about the Climate Change Action Plan. One of the things, and not to embarrass you or your team, but this project last year was shortlisted for the 32nd Annual Emerald Awards, which in the energy category, which is not an easy thing. I've worked with a lot of people in Alberta who've applied, and we're talking, heavy hitter industry, corporations, big projects, applied for the Emerald Awards, and then never heard back. And some get invited to the, I guess there's a gala. Is there a gala of some kind, I imagine?
Yeah, I've been able to join them. Actually, maybe just a bit as an update, we've been nominated for a number of now twice.
Oh, a second one. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So we were thrilled last year to be nominated. Our Environment and Climate Change Department got nominated for some of the work that we do, and most recently this year, Salay Prayzaan at Métis Crossing, our Otipemisiwak Métis Government owned solar power plant was nominated as well. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but we were delighted and really humbled to have received such nomination. I think it's really, we're really happy that some of our work is getting recognized.
Well, maybe it'll be third time a charm, as they say.
I hope so.
It reminds me, the Academy Awards. Who was it? One of the big actors.
Yeah.
Who was the guy that was with Robert Redford in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance? Paul Newman. I think he was nominated for like 8 times for Best Actor or something, and I'm not sure he ever won. But I'm sure that won't be the case here. I'm sure that they're aware of. I think personally, these kinds of awards tend to sort of, although they're always for a certain project in this case, or in the arts for a certain piece of music or a certain book, a novel, or a certain film. It really, I think it's kind of like a body of work. They sort of look at. I don't think any judge is capable of ever assessing just this project. They'll know that you had done other things, and they'll go, well, these guys really deserve recognition for all that they've done, but it's going to be that we give them the award for this one, because that's just the way the system works, right?
Yeah. So maybe I'll go back to because you talked about our climate change action.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah.
So where did we start? We started engaging with community. So I talked about my director, that was our first opportunity to engage with the community. So, me back in 2017, was just really, really new in the organization. We had this plan and we went to 18 communities across the province.
Wow.
We talked to more than 300 community members.
Wow.
Our sessions were 3 to 6 hours long. We really sat down. We really talked a lot about it. And really what we wanted to know is, when you hear climate change, what comes to mind? How is climate change important to you? Are you concerned? Do you see opportunities there? And we had a good report about that. And really what came out of that was a lot of direction for what became now our department. One of the things that we heard about was, there is a huge challenge, and we want the Otipemisiwak Métis government to do something about it. But at the same time, there's a huge opportunity. There's jobs, there's cost savings to be had, there's careers there. We want you as a government to ensure that we can capture some of those. And then, I think most interestingly, and I think something that I have taken really personally is a lot of the community really believes in this work. And I mentioned that I came from oil and gas. Doing climate change work in oil and gas, I think there's really, committed people that do really great work, but it is a bit of a harder sell, just because it's that environment. It's not a harder sell within this community.
Oh, okay.
And really, what I always kind of reflect on that is that it's like it propels this team to do amazing work. When you know that the community and the leadership is behind you, when they really truly believe that this is the right thing to do, it leads to amazing work. And so we launched what we call a Climate Change Action Plan as a series of initiatives and projects aimed at reducing GHG emissions while, creating space for the Métis community and businesses to capture some of those opportunities. As a matter of fact, actually, our annual General Assembly passed a resolution back in 2017 in Peace River. Actually, I remember it was a hot day. It was fans. It was so hot in this room. We had to buy fans everywhere, and it was that AGA. The first resolution was resolution on environment and climate change.
Really?
And I believe there was like 200 people in that room, and it was unanimous.
There's a vote of confidence.
Yeah. It really solidified the direction for this team. It's like, you know what? When we are doing this work, we know that the Métis community, actually the whole assembly unanimously is behind us. So it's been really...
That's not the easiest thing to do, because I've been to one or two of those assemblies, and the questions from the floor, it can get pretty heated from a political side of things.
Yeah.
So congratulations, that's great that you were able to get unanimity.
Yeah. No, it was really great, and that came from it was tabled by our co-ministers at the time, and I don't recall there being much debate. It was more like, if anything, I got the sense of like, we have to do this work, so let's just get on with it. Everybody vote, go on with it. And I also been in those discussions, and I can see a lot of debate. I don't recall a lot of debate. It was more like, this is a no-brainer. Let's get on with this. Yeah.
So I don't know if this is related. You'll tell us related to the action plan, and we're going to talk about this the solar power project at Métis Crossing, which I think you called it Salay Prayzaan, and we'll keep the listeners in suspense, and I'll ask you why it's called that in a minute. But I also was curious about this 2020 Catalyst program, and the Indigenous Clean Energy, or ICE. You hear this term ICE sometimes, and like all abbreviations or acronyms, in this case, sometimes you forget, what did it stand for? And it stands for Indigenous Clean Energy. Is that related to the Climate Change Action Plan, or is it a subset of it, or is it a different thing altogether?
Well, it's really interesting. So the 2020 Catalyst program it's capacity building program. What we mean with capacity building, we mean like it's an intense training course, really, and it's put on by this organization called Indigenous Clean Energy. It's a nonprofit. I had the great opportunity to join the 2020 Catalyst program back in 2017, and really what they teach you is, when you want to do a large-scale renewable energy project, what is it you need? It's a really inaccessible space. It's really complicated. Building a power plant is difficult work. And it has to be because people want to make sure that when they switch on the light switch, there's going to be electricity. And so, and regulators put a lot of, there's a lot of regulation, a lot of control as to what is power plant. But anyway, so what this program does is that it really equips Indigenous communities and the staff of Indigenous governments so that they can really create a space for them in that field. So, so it's 3 weeks. I was able to go to different parts of the country And we got like everybody. So, how do you design a good public engagement on what you want to do? What environmental pieces do you have to look at? What's the equipment? What type of legal pieces do you have to how do you form a good partnership? It's everything. It's everything, because when you build projects like this, are going to be like here for 25, 30 years, you want to get it right. You want to get it right from an environmental perspective, but also from a leadership perspective, from a location perspective. There's so many different fields. It gives you a little snippet in all these fields. And this is why they call it catalyst. You're not an expert. You're not a lawyer. You're not like an engineer in electricity, whatever. But you just know enough so that you then can connect the pieces so that you can form a successful project, right? So, I had the opportunity. How this connects to our program is it really kind of formed the foundation to what we call Salay Prayzaan today. When we started a climate change action plan with smaller projects, we did some what you call in Alberta microgen. So solar panels on the roof. We started really small. We started with 1, then it was 5. We now have 37 of them across the province, which is really exciting. And then what we've heard from the community was, you need to do more. It actually has to have an impact. And although we knew that it was going to be really hard to do a solar power plant, we looked at that possibility. So we started looking at, hey, maybe we should look at, we know that we've done this smaller project across the province, but what about a larger one that would have more of a dent in greenhouse gas emissions, that would produce more benefits to the organization? And we looked at a project at Métis Crossing and started exploring that. Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that. And then I'll put you on the spot and ask you to tell me about another one out of these 37 that strikes you as particularly interesting. So Métis Crossing, and we've talked about this in the podcast before, is northeast of Edmonton, and it is a tourist destination. It has extraordinary historical significance for the Métis. It's just down the river from Victoria's settlement, which was a trading location with the Hudson Bay Company, Indigenous communities, and the Métis all those eons ago. And as we've discussed elsewhere, over the course of time in the last recent decades, that the Métis have managed to reacquire really this property, and they built this amazing resort, and they have the Métis Fest there and a lot of other events and a stage, and they have music, and they have all kinds of stuff. They got you can go in. There's the repatriation of the bison. You can go and look at the bison. They've got these domes you can stay in. You can go out in the canoe and all these things. But in addition to that is this project, which has gotten a lot of media attention and a lot of fanfare, I guess we say out in layman's terms. And it's a solar farm, I believe, or a solar project. You're going to explain it to us. But okay, so first of all, why is it called the Salay Prayzaan? And it's one that got nominated for an Emma Award, right? This particular book. So tell us where the name came from, and tell us the genesis of this project and how it's developed and where it is today.
Yeah, so I'll tell you the genesis. So we're looking at what do we have to do to make a significant dent in GHG emissions, and we looked at our operations. At Otipemisiwak Métis Government has our offices across Alberta, but we also have affiliates. So we looked at all those facilities, and we looked at, hey, what are those facilities? What are they consuming in terms of energy, of electricity in particular? It's like, and then we asked our questions that what size of renewable energy project would we need to offset that electricity load, you call that, electricity draw from the grid. And we came up with this number, about 5 megawatts. 5 megawatts is roughly about 1,200 Alberta homes, right? So that's how much all of our operations consume.
For all the Métis Nation in Alberta and affiliates.
Correct.
The equivalent of 1,200 homes.
Yes.
What an interesting way to put it. Wouldn't it be awesome if we did this for everywhere and everything? Like each community, each residential community, a suburban community said, okay, this is how much energy we use. This is how we're going to, instead of everybody's on the grid, everybody's on the hydro grid. And once that grid gets going, it's really hard to stop that train. It's left the station.
That's how we started. It was like, hey, let's look. And we had really good data. And then we're like, okay, well, it's about 5 megawatts. And we started looking at it. Where can we put it? We looked in the south, because we weren't really looking at Métis Crossing from the start. You could put this anywhere, and you may know that if you place a project in the south, you get a lot more production. But there's a lot more other production because it's sunnier in the south.
I was going to ask, I was worried if it was a stupid question because the answer would be, no, it's not sunnier. Or if it was a stupid question because the answer would be, obviously, yes, it is sunnier. So it is sunnier.
It is sunnier in the south. It's also windier.
Oh, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Like to the east of the mountains.
So Southern Alberta is gifted with extreme solar and wind resource. So that's why you see a lot of development in Southern Alberta, right? And we were looking at areas in the south to start, but there's a lot more other things that you look at when you want to build a community-owned project, right? You want to make sure that the local community is on board. And so when we were looking at, well, where do we have presence that we know we have a good partnership in? And that's where Métis Crossing came to be. We had a long-standing relationship with the town of Smoky Lake,
nearby
Lake County. And so we knew that they were really excited about Métis Crossing up there. So we just made it a really natural fit. But yes, we might not produce as much energy as in the south, but the community's on board. We're excited about that. It's going to tell the story. Métis Crossing is about telling the Métis story. It's going to tell the story about the future of energy within the nation as well. So yeah, that's how we landed there. And we did what you call pre-feasibility work, which is self-reviews. Is there enough resources? What's the infrastructure there? We completed that back in 2018. And then we said, you know what? It looks like a good project. It looks like there's good potential. And then that's when we started doing the heavy work. That's when you hire all your consultants. You do like regulatory applications. You engage the regulators. That took about 2 years. Right?
Oh my gosh. So is that the Alberta Energy Regulator?
Yeah.
Or other regulatory?
The Alberta Utilities Commission.
Okay.
The Alberta Environment and Parks. So
it's a lot of paperwork.
Tons of paperwork, tons of studies. And again, it's because we want to make sure that we have good projects connecting to our grid so that they supply energy at the right times, right? And we did in 2020. And then since then, we've been fundraising. Yeah, how the name came to be really is when we knew that this was going to happen, we had just called it the Métis Crossing Solar Project, which is a really boring name. It just tells you where it's located and that it's a solar project. But, we knew our community was excited about it. So we had a public engagement, a public participation team, our engagement team say, hey, why don't we run a contest and ask our community, like, if you were to put a name to this project, what would it be called? And we received, I think, more than 90 name applications and name suggestions, and we reviewed them. And what really stood out is this Salay Prayzaan. Salay Prayzaan, and I might actually be mispronounced, is the Michif for gift from the sun. So Salay, sun, Prayzaan.
Oh, we just got a title for the podcast.
Yeah. It's a gift from the sun. And I think really what that really encapsulated was that, the sun is providing this gift of energy and it's powering our community. And it just really fit with the spirit of what we're trying to achieve in this. So yeah, it's a really nice name and we're really lucky to have it. And that's really how it came to be.
Isn't that fantastic? I love that name. So where is it? I mean, I've been there, and when I drive up there, I go over the bridge. As I'm going over the bridge, I can see the gathering center. I can see the hall that has 40 or so rooms. I can see all the grassy area leading to the stage, and then then the road continues up to Victoria Settlement, and then the Bison is up the hill. Yeah. Farther up the hill, and then there's parking. So where is the solar project in that environment?
Yeah, so it is north of the gathering center. It's a little bit north. So if you keep driving up the highway a little bit, you'll see it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
There is a reason why you can't see it going down into the bridge.
Oh.
It's a natural historic site, so viewscape requirements. You don't want to disrupt that viewscape.
No kidding.
Yeah.
How did you do that? How could you pull that off?
Well, we looked at different locations, right?
I see.
Yeah, so that's part of our pre-feasibility assessment. We looked at, this parcel of land, what are the things? And so we were aware of the viewscape requirements, right? And, when you talk about renewable energy project, actually, this is a bigger comment on that. This is why location is so important, right? We obviously did not want to put it in a location that would disrupt the viewscape of such a important historic site.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be around for 25 to 30 years, right? So location is something that you hear a lot in the renewable energy industry. It's like, you need to get the location right. We spent a lot of time looking at the right location.
This idea that you use the term viewscape, I'm sure this must apply only to solar, because those hydro people, someone takes a ruler, cuts a swath across a province, and they go, this is where the hydro cut's going, right through here. It's so picturesque when you're out driving around and you suddenly see this massive opening, or nuclear, not exactly a serene environment either. Never mind coal production. So I mean, I'm not saying that the viewscape only applies to solar, but it's interesting that this is an issue you had to take into account when you consider that these other traditional sources of power generation certainly do not seem to have had to take the view into account.
To be honest, like it's a fair comment, and I think to me is we really should focus on making sure that all energy is used equally, right? Like, and so they should have the same level of regulation and ensuring that they're doing it in such a way that does not really impact the local communities in the same way. So it was already a requirement, I think, for us. So if we wanted to build a wind power, it would have been a requirement there. If we wanted to build a coal power plant, we didn't want to do that. No. We would have had to do that the same way. But I could totally see what you're saying is, there's maybe this perception that it's more impactful. It isn't. I personally actually feel like whenever I walk in the power plant, it looks really beautiful. But people have different thoughts, but what we did is not discount them and hype them and go around them. What we did was listen to them and address them.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to ask you a specific question, because I've always wondered this. About this a solar plant facility or power plant, and then I'll put you on the spot with this question about these 37 sites, and we'll wrap up with that. But I'll just preface this by pointing out that power development projects are mega, and an example of that is up in the oil sands. It's 10 years for them to plan out and build a processing facility, and it can take 6 to 10 years just to build this thing, and it can cost $6 to $10 billion, and they don't see a penny until at some point after that period when it starts to flow. So it sounds to me like doing things locally, you have more control over it, and yet you can still generate all the energy that you need for a given community very specifically, which is really kind of cool. I mean, it seems like that's kind of the solution to climate change issue and greenhouse gas emissions, like globally. So just tell us, when you go there, is there someone there, or multiple people regularly monitoring it? How does the power move from a solar plant out and into the community? I've always wondered that.
That's a good question. You don't see a lot of people, actually.
Okay.
Like once it's built, it kind of operates on its own. We monitor it remotely.
Okay.
We look at the production. We actually are able to see if there's issues remotely. And only if something needs to be serviced, then we'll send someone. We do have quarterly maintenance schedules, but when you go there, it'll be an empty site that's just producing power silently.
Oh, and I guess the things that might come up would be what, like wind or hail damage or things.
And you design for all those. So
is that
you're at the design stage. This can withstand wind gusts. It's engineered to ensure that it's really anchored to the ground in a safe way. It can withstand hail and all these different pieces. These are folks that have built over and over different projects that have seen a whole bunch of environmental conditions.
And is the energy actively running now?
Yeah, we're producing power.
So, and when you say you can do all the impact of the Métis Nation and the equivalent of 1,200 homes, what you mean is the equivalent.
Yeah.
The power is not necessarily, because that would be ridiculous to send power lines to all these different places. So it's the equivalency. So that would mean Métis Crossing and I think the Smoky Lake community. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we did is actually just look at our Otipemisiwak Métis government operations. So we looked at all of our facilities. We essentially got energy bills from all those, and we accumulated that for a whole year.
That's how you do it.
And then you get what you if you look at your energy bill, have a kilowatt hour.
Kilowatt hour.
So we know how many kilowatt hours we need, and then we kind of back calculate, well, how many megawatts, how many panels.
Gotcha.
It ended up being about, I believe it's 16,000 panels, by the way. How many panels do we need to produce that energy within a year? Yeah.
16,000 panels.
Just under 16,000 panels, yeah.
So this is like the word, I mean, it's not a fair comparison, but the only thing that comes to mind readily for me is a vineyard. It's like a vineyard when it's fully grown. You just like see it forever, and you'd have to have like pathways through.
Yeah.
Is that what you have? You have like pathways, like gravel pathways, or do you have if you have to service a unit or something? Like
Yeah, so if you were to go into the site today, it's divided in two sections. It's 11 rows, and then you see all the panels lined up. So you usually put them in racks, and it's two panels vertically oriented. So you'll see like long rows of panels, 11 of them.
Very interesting.
Yeah, 25 acres, and it is fenced. Yeah, there's electrical code requirements, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And then, of course, well, you just made me realize another issue could potentially be wildlife.
Yeah, and we've looked at those as well. No, it's a really cool project. I personally, I think it's one of these projects that I have really enjoyed seeing from an idea in a desk. And I think I tell this story quite frequently, actually. I remember, I was just starting my job and said, we heard, we need to do something about this. And I talked to my director, Bruce Gladger, by the way, who's now passed, unfortunately. But he was a big visionary within the Métis Nation of Alberta. And actually, interestingly, a lot of the things that he had thought about the Métis Nation had actually come to reality, which is really interesting. But back then, I was like, hey, Bruce, we want to do all this work and we don't really know what to do. But, like maybe I know that, like, do you think a solar power plant would be a good idea? And then his direction was really, yes, do that. So yes, cannot do that. And that was my director's advice. And then we took that. And then
Was this an email?
no, it was a conversation. Okay. It's like, hey, Bruce, I just need your help. You got 2 minutes. And then yes, do that. And then, okay, well, that's my direction. So yes, do that. And yeah, it was a lot of work. But yeah, we're very excited. And so many partners like Town County, ADCO Electric, ADCO, we're helping us out building it, and Carvel Electric, a Métis-owned subcontractor, right? So there's that piece as well. We made sure that the Métis community was involved in the actual building of the power plant, and you name it. And funders, Government of Canada, the Government of Alberta, the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre as well. We have had so many friendly partners helping us out with this initiative. It's been really, really awesome.
So I promised my final question would be to ask you if there was another project. It doesn't necessarily have to be one of the 37 solar projects, but another project that you'd like to comment on that might have occurred to you over the course of our recording that you're really particularly proud of, or that you'd like to introduce to the world because it's new, or something that's, maybe going to get nominated for an Emerald Award. So what else is on the horizon?
Well, I mean, I'll keep it to the solar. I'm sure people can. What I would say for everybody, if you were interested in some of our work, go to our website and the Environment and Climate Change Department section. But just talking about this 37, and I'm actually going to talk a little bit about what our future vision is. So, as you may know, we have office buildings across the province, and our housing affiliate, Métis Housing, Métis Capital Housing Corporation, Métis Urban Housing Corporation, are the largest, if not the largest, there's the second largest Indigenous-led housing corporation in Canada.
Wow.
And what we're doing right now is we're really partnering with them to see what it would take to ensure that every roof that they have, it can fit solar production.
Wow.
Has solar production. So we started with 37. That's 520 kilowatts, about, I think, 90 Alberta homes per year. So you can already see we went from 90 to 1,200 on that Salay Prayzaan project. But our vision really is to ensure that every home, every building that the MNA or the Otipemisiwak Métis Government has that can fit solar has it. So that we're doing our part in our operations as well. And we're partnering with housing to do that. We're looking at funding to do that. And my hope is that within, the next 5 to 10 years, we can say that, every single roof space that we have across the province that can fit solar already has it. Yeah, so that's exciting to me. Yeah.
Imagine if the Otipemisiwak Métis government could say to the rest of the country and the world, we are solar powered. We are like a zero GHG, not net zero. We are 0.0.
Yeah, it's a good point. And when I just going back to the start of this is something that we can do today. The roofs exists. The solar technology exists. So to me, that's where we're starting. We're not going to start with the really challenging stuff. This is easy. And for us, it even economically, you may have seen electricity prices in Alberta. They're not cheap. Electricity is not cheap. When you invest in something like solar, that's going to be producing for 25 to 30 years. So there's actually a financial aspect to this that we haven't even touched on. You can run a financial analysis and sometimes it actually makes sense, right? So not only are you achieving your environmental goals, you're achieving your financial goals as well. So that.
Yeah, don't get me started on the subsidies to the coal sector, trillions of dollars in the United States that otherwise without the rest of the other sources of power would have been a level playing field. But you mentioned, and we'll end with this, you mentioned you wanted to talk a little bit about sort of the global vision moving forward for this program?
Yeah, well, where do we see this in 5 to 10 years? I think we really are going to continue to look at what we're doing within the Otipemisiwak Métis Government, making sure that our operations are more sustainable, that we produce more clean energy. We will love to partner on a large-scale renewable energy project in Alberta. So then maybe that's a call for industry. We're happy to engage in discussions on a good partnership on renewable energy. But we also want to make sure that a lot of the benefits that we've been able to realize within the Otipemisiwak Métis Government are also seen by our community members. We've heard over and over again, I want to do this. I want my business to do something about it. I want me personally, in my own personal life, I want to do something about it. I own a home. I want to be more sustainable. So this is exciting as well. We are looking at the potential of launching an Otipemisiwak Métis government-led program so that our citizens can access and do some of the work on renewable energy and energy.
Oh, really?
That we've been able to do internally. So that's going to be coming up over the next year. We foresee. So that's really exciting. And I think to me, it's like we want to be net zero operationally as an organization, as a government, but we also want to make sure that we provide the resources, the programs, the initiatives so that our citizens, our businesses can also take that step, right? We know that they're really engaged. They want to be engaged in this field, and we want to make sure that we can provide the opportunity for them to do something in that field as well.
Exciting stuff. Really, really, really appreciate it.
And maybe just that. That's not to say that they're not already doing it, because there's incredible Métis-owned businesses that are doing incredible work on environment and climate change already. It's really about us incenting that as the Otipemisiwak Métis government, ensuring that we realize that vision from our assembly back in 2017 that said you need to do this and you need to provide, open up space for opportunities. That's what we're doing there.
Well, what it really says to me is that what I've learned today talking with you is that a community that has some, political independence, some economic ability, leadership such as yours, can actually make a community-based difference, which if you were to multiply that by 10 communities, by 20 to 100 communities times whatever, you could really start to make a huge difference in emissions and in climate change and in the environment. And that's what has to happen. So.
And it's really going back to those values that I think what I heard from the community is that self-sustainability, like just not taking more than what you need. Remember that we talked about that. Is same for energy. Don't take more than you need. Produce it from a clean energy source. It's really going back to those Métis values of environmental stewardship.
Yeah, which is a genuine definition of sustainability, which has been the catchphrase for many years, going all the way back to the Brownland Commission report and the birth of sustainable development. So we've been speaking with Andres Filella, the Director of Environment and Climate Change at the Métis Nation of Alberta, the Otipemisiwak Métis Government of Alberta. Very educational session. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, David.